Every year, to end the year, I put together lists of what I think Apple did best and worst for the last 12 months. I've already posted the list of the worst, so now I'm going to spend a hot minute focusing on the positive, what Apple did right, and how I'd like to see Apple keep building on it for next year. Not because I'm a fanboy or an apologist or any other dismissive term, those who have tribal fury but lack the articulation to form any factual, cohesive arguments to the contrary, but because if you don't recognize the good along with the bad, the job's well done amongst those still left to be done, then you fail to promote the direction you want to see continue and focus you want to see carried on. So, what made the list this year? I'm Ray Ritchie. Welcome back to Vector. Thank you so much for joining me. Now fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be one hell of a ride. I said this in a video earlier and I'll say it again. I'll say it over and over again. Apple Watch is the most important product Apple has ever made because it saves lives. It saves lives in a way beyond what even a desktop, laptop, or pocket computer can. And I posted that before Apple introduced the Series 4 this September. Yeah, the edge-to-edge display is gorgeous. The extra antennas are great. The new workout stuff is fabulous, but it's the combination of new and improved sensors that enable fall detection and more and better heart rate alerts, up to and including a single pad equivalent electrocardiogram that can literally be life-saving. And it's not just all about the watch either. Over the last couple of years, Apple has taken what began with a way to more accurately measure calorie counting and built it out into the Health app, Research Kit, Health Kit, health records, and more. It's promoting standing, walking, running, swimming, hiking, yoga, and breathing. And since our bodies feed as much off of activity as they do food, each small push can become a part of a huge wave in terms of longevity and health. Because unlike desktop laptops and pocket computers, wearables like watches are not only always with us, but always on us. They can provide features no other type of technology can provide. And because Apple has put privacy and encryption first, it's uniquely positioned to tie those features into services in a way that keeps our personal data secret and secure. I don't think we're far off from even more sensors and capabilities coming online, and digital health going from being science fiction to science fact. But even this year, even today, even now, beyond any other consumer electronics product on the market, Apple Watch is already saving lives, and that's a remarkable achievement. In March of this year, Facebook was caught allowing access to the personal data of tens of millions of users, maybe more, maybe a lot more. It was the beginning of what became the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and it might just be what eventually does for privacy what Windows XP and malware did for security, sound the alarm that changes the industry. In April, following its March education event, Apple CEO Tim Cook was interviewed by Kara Swisher and Chris Hayes, and he said,
"The truth is, we could make a ton of money if we monetized our customer. If our customer was our product, we could make a ton of money. We've elected not to do that."
Swisher then asked Cook what would he do if he were Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg.
"I wouldn't be in this situation."
Zuckerberg was livid and shot back in an interview with Ezra Klein for Vox.
You know, I find that argument that if you're not paying, that somehow we can't care about you, to be extremely glib, right? And not at all aligned with the truth.
He went on.
There are companies that work hard to charge you more, and there are companies that work hard to charge you less. I think it's important that we don't all get Stockholm syndrome and let the companies that work hard to charge you more convince you that they actually care more about you, because that sounds ridiculous to me.
Over the course of the rest of the year, though, through revelations old and new, we've come to learn exactly how little Zuckerberg cared about the customers he'd referred to in the past with expletives, and just how high the real cost of free as in data could be. As the weeks and months went on, and more Facebook controversies and abuses were uncovered, over 20 at last count, Apple doubled down on privacy, launching a new portal in the summer and rolling out a major update to it in the fall, bringing macOS up to iOS's privacy standards and adding extra layers to both. What started with Steve Jobs sitting across from Walt Mossberg saying,
"Privacy means people know what they're signing up for, in plain English and repeatedly." That's what it means. I'm an optimist. I believe people are smart. And some people want to share more data than other people do. Ask them. Ask them every time. Make them tell you to stop asking them if they get tired of you asking them. Let them know precisely what you're going to do with their data.
has been codified by Tim Cook into a set of principles that guide everything at Apple, from the very beginnings of product development to the way every service runs every day. The simple fact is, any internet company that harvests your data creates a second or multiple points for that data to be exposed, accidentally or abused maliciously. It's happened over and over again with Facebook, with Google, with Amazon. It's not a maybe. Given bugs in code and flaws in humanity, it's just a certainty. So Apple is making sure it collects no data if it doesn't absolutely have to, collects the minimum amount of data possible when it does have to, anonymizes and does not associate that data with any user accounts unless it absolutely has to, encrypts the data end-to-end during any and all transmissions of that data, and then keeps the data only as long as it absolutely has to. Now, Apple still faces some immense challenges. Countries like China are demanding their customer data be localized on their own soil and subject to their own laws. Countries like Australia are demanding access to encryption, and balancing what data should be fail-secure, like your private messages, and what should be fail-safe, like the photos of your kids, is becoming increasingly complex and difficult. But from the very top down, in the most customer-facing way possible, Apple is positioning itself as privacy first and is taking consistent, meaningful steps towards implementing and improving those goals. Whether you use Apple or not, whether you like Apple or not, it's a critical option for consumers to have and an example the rest of the industry ought seriously consider following. At its March education event, Apple introduced a new 9.7-inch iPad with pencil support for $350 and less if you're a school. It also announced new software for the classroom. To the lamentation of many, there was nothing schools could use to replace Google account or document management and collaboration, which from a privacy standpoint is still a gaping hole that someone desperately needs to fill. But Apple did expand the Everyone Can Code curriculum and added an all-new Everyone Can Create curriculum as well. From the iPad event in October, Apple also announced dozens and dozens of new courses as part of Today at Apple, its retail-based educational initiative. It greatly expanded all the classics like photography, music, coding, and apps, but it also added design courses and more. That's on top of Hour of Code, Apple Camp, field trips for schools, Swift Playgrounds, and the other programs Apple has been running and expanding for years. Taken together, it represents hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in free educational services, not just for Apple users, but for anyone and everyone interested in any of the products or features Apple makes available. I'm sure Apple sees it as an investment, as playing the long game, which is rare enough in the tech sector. But for everyone in the community, it's not a game at all. It's a chance to learn new, real skills they can use for the rest of their lives, maybe even use to start new lives. Apple has had a performance team for a long time. Part of their jobs is to carry older devices running upcoming operating systems. Engineers have often carried older devices as well, partially because they have family members on those devices and they want them to have as good an experience as possible. But every year, as launch leads to crunch, like anything that isn't a specific focus, it ends up getting lost as push comes to shove. This year, though, performance wasn't just a specific focus. It was the headline feature.
For iOS 12, we are doubling down on performance.
The goal of iOS 12 was to make iPhone and iPad faster and more responsive, not just on current generation 2017 and 2018 hardware, but on up to 5 generations going back to 2013. In an industry where many vendors struggle or don't even bother to ship the latest software, and non-flagship devices still sometimes never see a single update at all, never mind updates going back half a decade, that's a significant commitment from Apple and a huge value add for customers. Apple literally took the best and the brightest engineers, the ones who make the underpinnings of the system, and in any other year would be leading the charge to push out new features, and had them spend their time improving the performance of the existing frameworks or technologies instead. And that's always a risk, especially when Google is the competition and they're spinning up terrific new features year after year as well. It was an effort that went from Johnny Cerrugi's Silicon team to Craig Federighi's Springboard and UIKit engineers to the core of Lisa Jackson's environmental and sustainability policies. And it really paid off. Even in the first betas, older devices worked better. Now, 6 months later and 3 months post-release, and even the oldest of the older devices are running quicker and better than they have in years. And all Apple has to do now is keep it this way going forward. No pressure. When 2018 began, the Mac Mini and MacBook Air hadn't been updated in an embarrassing number of years. The MacBook Pro was facing everything from keyboard complaints to charges that it just wasn't pro enough. Apple was having a hard time with the Mac community and an even harder time with its Mac Pros, who saw the company as deprioritizing them at best and abandoning them at worst in the face of the massive mainstream success of the iPhone and iOS. The only glimmer of hope to hold on to was the then just announced iMac Pro and the unusual disclosure of a new modular Mac Pro and Pro Display somewhere, somewhen on the horizon. Then, in the spring, we began hearing about a new Pro Workflows team at Apple, a group of video and music producers and editors, photographers, designers, and other industry people who had joined Apple to help make sure the next generation of Macs, macOS, and Pro apps really were aligned with Pro user interests. At WWDC, we got Mojave, yes, and its oh-so-Pro dark mode, but also a focus on infrastructure wrapped up in a candy Pro features for everyone wrapper. July saw new MacBook Pros, not only with the Intel Coffee Lake chips, but was something I've been asking for since 2016, an even higher end SKU on the top for pros whose time was worth way more than any amount of Mac money. i9, 32 gigabytes of memory, and 4 terabytes of solid state storage later, and wow, did we get it. Apple even tweaked the keyboard design, adding a membrane which seems to have resulted in far fewer complaints, at least over the last few months as well. Then came October and a new MacBook Air with a Retina display and Amber Lake processor, and a new Mac Mini with Coffee Lake and a decidedly Pro focus. We didn't get a new Amber Lake 12-inch MacBook or a new Coffee Lake iMacs, or whatever the hell Intel is calling the current generation Xeon for iMac Pro. So Apple still isn't updating every Mac every year, but for the first time in many years, no Macs have been completely left behind. One thing that did, though, was Wi-Fi routers. Apple is still out of the airport business, but former Apple engineers have taken everything we loved about the simplicity and reliability of those products and brought them fully into the modern age of mesh. I'm talking about Eero, and this time, specifically, I'm talking about Eero Plus, which gives you the ability to block malicious sites and filter out violent, illegal, or adult content so you can choose what your kids can and can't visit. Also, ad blocking to prevent pop-ups and improve load times, VPN protection from Encrypt.me, password management from 1Password, antivirus from Malwarebytes, and the list goes on and on. All in systems so easy to set up that I was able to do it in minutes at 3 in the morning when my old router died unexpectedly and I was desperate to get a video up in time for an embargo. Seriously, never think about Wi-Fi again. Get $100 off the Eero base unit and 2 beacons package and 1 year of Eero Plus by going to Eero.com/Vector and using promo code Vector at checkout. Thanks, Eero, and thanks to all of you for supporting the show. There's one more thing I wanted to give a shout out to this year, and that's Apple's camera team. There's a lot of debate online about who makes the best camera, and different people love Huawei, Samsung, Google, and Apple, and all for good and valid personal subjective reasons. Huawei makes me really want a big third wide-angle lens on all of my phones, and Google makes nighttime look like daytime. And when you take the scope of hardware and software that entails and you project it out, the whole industry is just going to get more and more exciting in the years to come. There are 2 things I think Apple's team did really well this year that especially stand out. The first is elevating portrait mode from a custom disk blur to a full-on computational lens model that renders and re-renders depth effect as the scene and artificial aperture changes. And not only did they do that for the telephoto lens on the iPhone XS, but they did a completely different, completely authentic version for the wide angle on the iPhone XR as well. It's video though where the iPhone's competition can't be found in other phones, but only in dedicated cameras. And the difference only continued to grow with the not just rock solid 60 frames per second 4K video, but now the extended dynamic range that interleaves in real time at 30 frames per second and under, along with, stereo audio recording. A lot of the credit for this should be shared with the Platform Technologies team that, year after year, keeps turning out the best damn silicon in the business. Period. But it also comes together to give the iPhone the unique ability to go from pocket to picture in an instant and show you what you're getting to shoot the whole way through. At least that's what I think. Now let me know what you think about any or all of the items in my list above, and any items I left out that you think should be included. Hit like, hit subscribe, and then hit up the comments below and let me know. And thank you so much for watching.